What is reality? It's a potentially unknowable phenomenon. We at least think we know, partially and to some extent, through observation and experimentation in science. Though physicists will probably provide opposing views when asked. The core divide here is whether reality is, in a simplified nutshell, physical or non-physical. And I use the word simplified here in recognition of hybrid theories that may claim it to be both. In philosophy, the same divide exists, and we shall soon see when we dissect, very briefly, this particular branch of idealism, that philosophers' ideas of what non-physical means can also be very different. Introducing Metaphysical Idealism. This is a theory of reality that comes in many forms, though what is shared throughout these viewpoints, in essence and in its core, is that reality is dependent on and is a product of mind. It is a response to, and in most views, a polar opposite to materialism, which holds reality, including consciousness and thought, as being ultimately physical, or a result of physical processes. As this is a brief introduction, I'll identify 4 forms of metaphysical idealism, and describe what it is each theory concludes. Firstly, subjective idealism. A metaphysical theory given by George Berkeley in 1713, which is a combination of idealism and immaterialism. This variant holds the aforementioned core of idealism, along with the claim that matter does not exist. Berkeley claims that the physical world is composed of ideas, or in other words, thought. His motto, esse est percipi, translated as "to be is to be perceived," I think captures the substance of his theory beautifully. Extreme variants of this can lead to solipsism. Secondly, Transcendental Idealism, also known as critical or formalistic idealism. This is an epistemological approach from Immanuel Kant in 1781, which in a sense splits reality. Kant claims that what we experience represents our own personal perspective, what he calls appearances, but not what these things are in of themselves, and in substance. Quoting Kant himself, everything intuited or perceived in space and time, and therefore all objects of a possible experience, are nothing but phenomenal appearances. That is, mere representations, which, in the way they are represented to us, as extended beings, or as a series of changes, have no independent self-subsistent existence apart from our thoughts. This doctrine I entitle Transcendental Idealism. The other half of reality that correlates to the phenomenal, Kant called the noumenal, which are the perceived things in of themselves and in substance. This cannot be directly experienced. Thirdly, objective idealism. Thought to be first represented by Plato, though this can be debated, was later definitively formulated by Friedrich Schelling in the early 1800s. There are variations of this doctrine, but in summary, he holds that all of reality is essentially one mind, and our experience manifests when this universal mind communicates with our human minds. This sounds like a contradiction, but to my understanding, and feel free to object to my interpretation below, human minds, in this view, exist within the universal mind, and in perceiving the world out there, our minds act as apertures, if you will, through which the universal mind experiences itself. The theory postulates that there is only one perceiver, and that this perceiver is one with that which is perceived. An important aspect of this theory is that this defined absolute identity asserts there to be no difference between the subjective and the objective, that is, the ideal and the real. This leads to the fourth and final variant we'll cover in this video, absolute idealism. an adaptation of objective idealism with apparent similarities, formed by George Hegel, also in the early 1800s. This doctrine is named as such due to the familiar claim that reality is based on a universal mind, or absolute spirit, though Hegel's view differs in that a distinction is made between the subjective and the objective. Hegel's idealism states that what we experience is a reflection of mind, and that this is the finite, subjective if you will, world, which alone is truly real. He holds that our limited being presupposes infinite, unlimited being, or the absolute. This is because what we reflect is that which already exists outside of ourselves, an objective reality. Within Hegel's theory, he went on to highlight the importance of the individual person and the unfolding of history through time, holding that the human concept of the world comes from ever-changing and evolving absolute consciousness. Hegel believed that this evolution was a direct relation between our own growing self-awareness and the changing progressive movement of the absolute. One of Hegel's goals was to explain that humanity is not separate from the world, but an integral part of it. Idealism in its metaphysical form comes in many different varieties, and it can be slightly mind-boggling when beginning to explore them. I hope this video acts as a gentle introduction to some of the most influential theories within this quite beautiful branch of metaphysics. What do you think?